and I got a skeptical note back from Mark,
Yeah.
and and I you know, to the effect of, let me tell you why you're wrong. And I said, all right, you know, but wait, before, if you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, let's do it as a video or a chat, and we'll have a face-to-face or
We'll have a public
virtual
shaming.
interaction, and it could be a good discussion. And
Totally.
so it's slightly absurd in that we've got you know, two Jews in New England arguing about whether there's a Christian Renaissance in Silicon Valley. I don't know. You edited a piece about it recently,
I
and
did.
I've been thinking about it for a while. So tell me why you're skeptical, or why
Well,
it's
I'm
wrong.
gonna let me push it back. Let me push back on that format a little bit, even though I think this is your show. It was your idea. I think you bring a much bigger audience, and it's your show. Um, which is that I think that the way to go, since you have for some time. I mean, you wrote a piece some time ago saying, "Is JD Vance going to herald a Christian revival?" I mean, you've been on this beat, and I'd like you to make the affirmative case. I mean, well, here's what I'll say. It's well known that the Bay Area is one of the least religious places in America. It's one of the least churched, um, for a number of reasons that I could get into, because the history of Christian denominationalism is the thing I've been nerding out on since graduate school. It's to some extent what I wrote my dissertation on for my doctorate. Like, and if there's a kind of baseline fact that people in the field of American religious history can accept, it's that you know the San Francisco Bay Area is where religiosity goes to die, or certainly traditional religion. In terms of the number of people attending church, attending synagogue, but there are other measurements as well. For example, there's no historic Jewish neighborhood in San Francisco, or really in San Jose, or I mean, Seattle's a little bit different, but these are places where if you wanted to open a kosher deli in say greater San Francisco, you wouldn't even know where to put it, which is not true in Philadelphia. You'd put it out the main line. Historically, you would have put it in Strawberry Mansion. In Boston, the places you would put it in greater Boston. Um, Bay Area has just not been a place where people root religion. And part of it is because um, in terms of American migration patterns, people moved west often to escape family ties, to start anew, to not be bound by the old ways. Um, the immigrants who came directly to the West Coast were often coming from East Asia and Buddhist cultures that didn't plant into the American denominational system in obvious ways. Um, and so it was just not, as opposed to upstate New York, New England, the South, places that had revivals, that had histories that had infrastructure, that had churches, that had denominational history. The Bay Area sort of has none of that. There are exceptions, but broadly speaking, that's kind of like a well-known fact. So I guess what I would say is anyone who's trying to persuade me, oh, there's a Christian revival going on in Silicon Valley, that's more than just the fact that Peter Thiel claims to be a Christian and Elon Musk is Christian curious and whatever. They're going to have some work to do. They're going to have some work to do demographically. They're going to have some work to do anthropologically, historically. Like the facts are pretty much arrayed against them, but I'm certainly open to it. I mean, as a religion journalist, I love expensing trips out to the Bay Area. It's a beautiful place to visit. If there are stories to be had, and my friend Emma Goldberg wrote one of those stories for the New York Times, which actually was something you cited in your piece. Like Kol HaKavod, the more of these stories, the better. And if it's true, then I'll be the first to say it. But I'm dubious. So I think what I would say is, you're the one who's been saying, hey, you haven't said it is happening, but you've sort of optimistically been saying, is it happening? Could it be happening? And I guess I would like you to make that case, because it strikes me as very unlikely.
Right. Well, so um, I guess the case, I wrote a piece in the editors reviewing this Joe Lieberman book,
Right.
and um, Joe Lieberman goes back over the course of American history, and tracks these kind of a
Revivals.
series
Yeah.
of revivals. And actually, I wrote about it also in my biography of Samuel Adams that there was a great awakening in New England that preceded the American Revolution, and
Mm-hmm.
people argue about the causes of that. But these traveling preachers drawing huge crowds, and may have actually helped contributed to the American Revolution. Um, um, so if you look at the trend lines of church attendance or belief in God in America, um, so there's a downward slope probably having to do with modernity, but there's also a lot of ups and
Mm-hmm.
downs. And and the downward slope recently has been so dramatic, I think
Right.
partly because of the COVID effect on church attendance,
Mm-hmm.
that um, just kind of this thermostatic effect would seem to be that we're surely
We're
due
due.
for an awakening. And so when the New York Times, which is not exactly like um a hype organ for American Christianity,
Right.
um, is writing about some church in San Francisco that's getting 1,000 people every
Right.
Sunday, um, or some or I.N. Hersey Alley, who was on the vanguard of the kind of skepticism of religion, as a reaction to extreme Islamic extremism, violent extremism. You know, she was a outspoken atheist, agnostic, type person. So she's now all of a sudden a Christian. So I think we need to wait. We've seen, I think the latest Gallup or Pew, I think it was a Gallup poll, showed some comeback from that COVID era,
Right.
plunge in weekly religious service attendance. It's still nowhere it's been. And I guess, on the San Francisco thing, I guess the counter argument I'd give there, um, is that, I don't know. I lived in California for a year. I've been out there to visit a fair amount, and it's not entirely different from America as a whole. There's all these Hispanic immigrants, who it's not just like it's not just white people in Silicon Valley or
True.
Indians. Like
True.
there's a lot of Hispanics there, and Hispanics are pretty Christian. And there's two other uh, trends in Silicon Valley. Um, One is a kind of self-improvement trend. So like everybody's taking these weight loss drugs. People are doing yoga. There was a lot of interest in Eastern religions that coincided with the growth of the personal computer. And so I think the more the research shows that religion is actually good for you in terms of counteracting the isolation of social media, and bringing community and a sense of gratitude and humility. Um, you know, I think there'll be a sort of utilitarian uh, approach, of people saying, hey, I'll check this out just like I might check out a Pilates class,
Right.
in that it could be good for you. And no one in Silicon Valley wants to be left out of that, kind of self-improvement kind of that's very Northern California. And the other thing I'd say is just like the artificial intelligence boom um, puts a bit of a a premium on both ethics in terms of like creating boundaries for these um, new models, and also humanity. Like, what's the distinguishing thing between an artificial intelligence and a human intelligence? And if that thing is a soul, um, I think it raises some questions that Christianity and Judaism potentially have answers to, that people will be seeking. Now, obviously, like, that's hugely different from saying like, oh, well, I have a poll showing that church attendance in the
Right,
San Francisco Bay Area is
right.
up like 30%. But, that's journalism as opposed to social science. And, you know, um, we'll have to see. So I just
Yeah,
talked a lot, but I'll let
no, that's
you
fine.
respond
Hey,
to that.
as I said at your show, Stuart Rose complimented you on not having a tie today. I was just looking at the comments. And my old friend Gary Reader's here making good points, and he knows, having grown up the son of a pastor, he has wisdom I don't. But um, so there are a number of things to unpack there. Like, certainly, everything you're saying is interesting for this conversation, and has important aspects of truth in it. Right, the Bay Area has historically been a place with a lot of New Age spirituality, with a lot of wellness culture, with a lot of that stuff. It's important. I think we have to analytically sort our categories out here a bit. Places that are very high on wellness culture, where people turn to a kind of new age spirituality, to use kind of very loaded and crass terms, but they'll do for now, uh, are not usually places where there's also a lot of traditionally rooted religiosity. So, part of the question is, what are we talking about here? If we're talking about church attendance or church engagement, whether you walk through the doors or not might not be the relevant question, but are you paying dues to a church? Are you a member on their rolls? Are you on the parish, the rolls of your parish church, Catholic, church? Does the diocese know about you? Again, I'm applying the filter of, growing up in Irish Catholic Springfield, Massachusetts here. Like, do you play Little League Baseball for Holy Name or Our Lady of Sacred Heart? These are the questions I ask, right? Um, and you can have a place suffused with spiritual questing with very little engagement or membership. And one of the interesting things about Emma Goldberg's piece in the Times was, she was saying, inter alia, right, among other things, there's a church that's getting 1,000 people. I believe that. I believe there's a church that's getting 1,000 people in the Bay Area. There are probably a few, actually. We are certainly demographically and statistically past peak megachurch, right? You will find places that get very good turnout, um, and they come and go. And some of the ones that got amazing turnout 10 and 15 and 20 years ago, the turnouts come way, way, way down. Like, megachurching actually isn't the thing of the moment. Just ask the Southern Baptist Convention, which is having fewer baptisms now than it was having 10 or 20 years ago. Like, they are clearly past their own peak of growth, and they may even be shrinking. Um, so the it, it, we have to ask ourselves, which are we asking? Are we asking, are there some Silicon Valley people, potentially a lot of them, who have really serious concerns about what makes humans specific and unique? What is the role of AI? This butts up against questions about, you know, can we live forever? About lifespan and all sorts of weird AI tech bro nonsense. All of which was satirized so well by Silicon Valley on HBO, which I've watched all of twice. Emma Goldberg mentions it in her article. You should all go back. You should all watch it. But the idea that sort of new age, and especially futuristic and AI spiritual questing, is the backbone of the kind of rechurching that we saw, or churching or rechurching that we saw in those revivals that Joe Lieberman writes about, is not defensible, right? They're different phenomena. They're united in that human beings have a quest for meaning, and You can put everything, you can be very promiscuous with the term religion and put everything under the umbrella and say, well, for some people, football is their religion, and for some people, Taylor Swift is their religion. And religious studies scholars will even make these arguments and say, well, look, they have ritual. If you're a football fan, you have a place to go every Sunday. You have clothing that you wear that identifies you to your fellow religionists. You have allegiances. Like, you can make these arguments that everything's religious or that lots of things are. But I don't actually find, if everything's religious, then nothing is. And so what I'm always interested in is a very important category for me is, are you sacrificing anything? Because people who join a local church or synagogue, they're giving time, or they're giving money, or they're giving emotional commitment. They're giving it over sustained periods of time. They're involving their children and spouses in it. They're often asking other people to join, which can come at a sort of psychic cost, right? It's hard to knock on doors or even just reach out to people and say, hey, we're having a Bible study. And some people do it in Silicon Valley, like the articles, are clear on that. But that is really different from signing up for a yoga class, which I do. I like yoga, but it's not my Judaism. And so I think we're really asking about two very, very separate things. There is no evidence on the ground yet that any part of this country is more churched now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Like, could the evidence come? Absolutely, it could come. Um, uh, Although, Jonathan Rauch's new book, right, which we reviewed in ARC, the evidence that actually we're in pretty much a long-term crash. Religion, like a couple dozen churches close in America every week. Do you know any Protestants who go to church, Ira? Do you know anyone who's like active in their local Lutheran church or Methodist church?
Um, I do know church-going Protestants. I was at a dinner with a bunch of them
Okay,
last night here in Boston.
so they're
And
the
for sure they exist, just
they
like
exist.
synagogue
Yeah.
and whatever. It wouldn't be the first time that Christianity was a minority countercultural
So
movement. It grew from that
it did, but
and
give me 1 second, and then I just want to finish with what I was saying, which is, it is really important for people who are getting high on the fumes of Peter Thiel and these other people and Elon Musk talking about Jesus to say, what are you giving? Are you giving anything? Would you actually stay home because there was a church supper on Wednesday night and you should go? And if not, then I fundamentally think they're probably full of hot air. This is nonsense, right? And we know that Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, like, they actually don't know that much. They're good at a couple specific things. They're good at making money. But anyone who listens to them on podcasts and hears them talk about Rene Girard or hears them talk about Jesus, or like, they're actually making it up, right? They aren't profound, they aren't intellectual or theologically oriented or particularly smart people. They're good at a particular thing, which is making money, which doesn't map onto other skills or gifts at all, right? So, like, the idea that you wrote in one of your things that, well, Donald Trump knows, he's now selling a Bible, he tends to know where things are going. It is not the case that Donald Trump is thoughtful, smart, or knowledgeable about religion. And it's not the case that he has his finger on any sort of pulse. It's magical thinking, it's religious thinking to think that he has some sort of prophetic, umbilical connection to the Jungian archetypes of America. And that's just not, it comes from people who kind of adore these people, as you have a kind of admiration for them. You think they're kind of great, but they're not great. They're sad. They're probably lonely. Mark Andreessen claims that he's spent half the time or all the time since the election at Mar-a-Lago. He has an 8-year-old son. Think of how broken you have to be to move out on your family to go be a courtier or courtesan, or I don't know what, a court member, I don't know what the term is, not a courtesan, courtier to Donald Trump when you have a child. So these are not people who actually are spiritual leaders in any way. Quite the opposite. What they need is to talk to a local Methodist pastor or rabbi or lay leader or deacon or nun whom we've never heard of, and say, how can I connect to greater meaning? But they're not leaders in this. And the mistake that a lot of us make is thinking that because they have money, that they have wisdom. But the evidence is radically against that in terms of their divorces, in terms of their detachment from their children. We have a president who didn't raise his own children. That's incredibly sad, Ira, isn't it?
well, I'd like to on the children point, like, I
These
don't
are
know,
people
there
who
was
don't
a
spend time with their own children.
picture
Of
from
Elon with his son
yesterday
X,
of like Musk with one of his
with
kids in
one of
the
his kids. But we know
Oval
he can't be
Office.
raising all his kids, right? Can we just agree with that? He's not a good dad. Can we across political lines,
I
right?
don't know. I'm not in his,
Well, he's moved to
I'm
Washington.
not in his family
Well, wait a
dynamics.
second.
And
He's moved to Washington. He's not at home.
I
He's not at
think
home. He's not coaching,
you don't
literally.
know who he took with him. I mean, the,
They aren't good people, though.
I think, you know, there's one of the things that these religions tell us is that nobody is perfect. Only God is perfect. And we're all working to get better and need
For sure.
grace and forgiveness. And um you know, if it's a choice between Trump selling the Bible or The Art of the Deal or a book about himself, uh, you know, you know, I, I, as long as the words are accurate, like I don't really mind if it's the Trump Bible. Like like, you know, I don't think if Trump is the God, it's a false God. Clearly, you know, if money's the God, it's a false God. Clearly, but if some of these things um, bring people closer to authentic traditions, like I'm not so into like attacking the messenger. There's no perfect messenger.
No, no.
Um, uh,
Can I say it's not attacking the messenger? It's us as journalists being honest, right? So, like, there's plenty of reporting out there that say Elon Musk doesn't spend much time with his children. He should be shamed for that a little. But well, wait, just because he's a trillionaire doesn't mean he shouldn't be shamed for that a little. Like, dads should raise their kids. This is like the message that I grew up on, reading a mix of liberal but also conservative publications, is dads should raise their kids. We shouldn't exalt people as leaders who have the money and the resources and all the privilege in the world, who are walking out on their children. And if it, and so to sit like the idea that he is now an avatar of some sort of spirituality has to be tested again. To some extent, it has to be tested not against our perfection, but against our ambitions. And there are a lot of people involved in the movements we're talking about whose ambitions, I think, have to do with family formation. And I'm a natalist, not the kind that JD Vance is, but I think we need natalism to be a big tent with all political persuasions. And I think there's a lot of good conversations happening, but they are in tension with, for example, the love of money, right? They are in tension with the things that, I mean, I don't think we could disagree that, like, Peter Thiel and Donald Trump, and they think that accumulating a lot of money is a great thing. They're not talking a lot about giving away a lot of money as a great thing. I don't mean all their money, I mean a lot. So, but I'm saying, like, to have this conversation about spirituality and awakening as if it's about what podcasts one listens to, and this is not me or you, this is just like the ambient sort of religious vibe. Like, well, so and so went on Jordan Peterson's podcast, like, right, but has so and so helped prepare the church potluck? Is so and so going to the pastor and saying, "Does anyone need a hospital visit? I have some free time." And trillionaires shouldn't be less responsible for that, but more, right? Because they actually could do whatever they want. And we treat them as if, like, well, the gift they have is like ideation. Actually, the gift that someone like Peter Thiel has is money and time, because he could really stop right now and just be a good Christian forever. So I guess there's such a disconnect between what I would see as some sort of revival and the way that the so-called revivalists or the avatars of it are leading their lives. I mean, if I'm being unfair and judgy, like, please be the first to tell me.
yeah, I mean, I guess I see it differently. I mean, I just see like, um, you know, the reality is in America that some people have bigger like clout platforms than others, whether it's because they have a title at a university or they have a lot of money or they're famous and have a lot of Instagram followers or they're athletes. Like like you know, you could look at the the Super Bowl ad with Tom Brady and uh, Snoop
Dog.
Dogg about, you know, against hate, and say like, well, why'd you do the ad with Tom Brady and Snoop Dogg and not, you know, Ira Stoll and Mark Oppenheimer? And well, the answer is like, you know, those people are gonna get people to watch the commercial. So the fact that Trump is issuing, the fact that there's rich people involved, it doesn't like it doesn't scare me. Like
No,
it's just it's a high status it's a high status indicator. And as just on a sacrifice point, like there, I think that's actually like kind of funny. Like the I think um I think there's a wide amount of variation. um I think there's like a tendency to think, um especially in Christianity, like if you're, or and sometimes in Judaism too, right? Right. If you're not suffering, it's not authentic. Uh, but I think the reason one reason these things are positive is on a net basis. They're not sacrifices for people. They're tremendously like additive. And maybe that's like a supply sider approach to to religion. Like you can
it's the
have your spending,
Laffer curve of religion.
you can have your spending and your tax cuts, you know but like whatever time you spend volunteering or donating, like it's gonna pay you back so much more in terms of community and connections and psychic benefit, as we psychic
No,
rewards.
I think that's true. I mean, no, I think we agree on that, and that's why that's again, it's I don't again, um, I have no rich people don't scare me either. Some of my friends are rich. I'd like to be rich. It would be nice. I think I'd do good things with the money, and that would include buying sweaters and you know going to more expensive concerts. Paying $500 to see Springsteen or like I would be a great steward of my own wealth. So to be clear, I am not hostile to wealth. Um, but I also don't think rich people should deserve to be treated, nor is it healthy for them or society to be seen as different, right? So, um, if you really wanted to see a Christian revival, let's try this thought experiment. What if Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen and I don't know, I actually don't know the names of lots of Silicon Valley weirdos because I don't think they're very interesting. It's like actually one of the least interesting sectors of our economy, right? And they're boring when you hear them interviewed again because what they know is sort of one thing, how to make money, but they think they know lots of things like the future of the human race and the soul and whatever. So it's actually it's like listening to people with MBAs talk, right? I mean, they know accounting and finance, whatever, but then they don't have wisdom about much else out of proportion, like any more than the rest of us do, right? Um, so what would be really amazing for a thought experiment is take, 10 Silicon Valley plutocrats and imagine if they said, we're not going to go to Davos this year, and we're not going to go to this, and we're not going to go to that, and we're not going to go to Apple Con and this con and whatever. We're going to cut our travel back and cut our spending back and really devote ourselves to our church. And this one's going to First Lutheran in Palo Alto, and this one's going to, St. Stephen's Methodist in Redwood City, and this one's going to whatever in Atherton. And maybe we're going to use our platforms and blog about it, or Instagram about it, or Substack about it, or whatever. But it's going to be about the connections we form with people of different walks of life, different ages, elderly people, young people, people with disabilities, people of different races at our church, synagogue, mosque, whatever. And that's what I'm going to do. Imagine the story that would be, right? Um, and it's telling that none of them do, right? It's telling that you
Yeah,
can't,
but I don't
you
think
can't,
you have
it's
to.
telling because they're not, some of them do. And to their credit, we wouldn't know because they'd be quiet and modest about it. But the people who go on podcasts and have their PR agents book them into shows and whatever to talk about their spirituality are not actually in their lives, as far as we know. They could be quiet or modest about it, changing their lives in ways that humble themselves at all, or that sacrifice even for their own and others' growth.
Yeah, I don't know that it's an either or. Like there is a Shabbat dinner at Davos. Like it's
But how sad, right? Like,
no, I
why
think
aren't they
it's
all home with their
great. It's
families? No,
great.
why
It's
aren't they?
great.
Well, I mean, I guess Shabbat dinner or no Shabbat dinner Davos, I'd say it's good if there is one. But like, Why aren't these people home with their families more?
Well,
I'm posing
somebody's got to
something.
make the money. I don't
I mean,
know.
I'm posing something no one ever poses, right? The question I would have if I were in Trump's office right now is, do you feel you spent enough time with your children when they were young? And nobody ever asked them that. And why are it's like you shrug your shoulders. I'm not picking a fight with you. It's with like society and journalism. Like, why don't we ask them the things we'd ask our neighbors at least, or that we want to know about why do we let them off the hook for being real people?
Yeah.
Because that's religiosity. I mean, one of the central messages of Christianity is like that actually everyone's equal in the eyes of God, right? I mean, and this is Judaism too. Like we're all made but Selam Elohim. We're all the image. Like there are no distinctions. And this thing we do where we crown certain people philosopher kings, which is very much part of what's going on with this, the new spirituality of Silicon Valley, is we're actually forgetting that we're all the same. We're all equal. We all have equal, like our souls are all equally divine. We all have equal claim on the government fisc, on compassion, on all sorts of things. And I just like, I think those are the questions we'd want to know about them, right? I mean, if I could sit down with Peter Thiel, I'd like, well, which congregation have you joined? Whom are you in fellowship with? And if the answer is only other plutocratic tech bros, couldn't we agree something would be broken there?
I don't know. I mean, like in New York, you could go to the garment workers synagogue. I mean, there's plenty of precedent for people self-segregating according to their work
True.
in religious congregations, and some of that just happens ordinarily by geography. Um, um,
Yeah.
so 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 yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think this has been a fun conversation.
Yeah. Are we
I
done? You had a half an hour? I'm good. I could go forever. It's
Well,
this or I have to
no,
go write stuff. No, I
I
mean, I
don't.
think,
I would encourage people to sign up for Mark's Substack if you're not already signed up. It's Oppenheimer, the Oppenheimer Substack,
can I ask you
and
a question
yeah,
before we go? Because I was really like, I thought you're writing on Lieberman. I mean, I went back and read everything you read on this, and the editors is great. And to the extent I brought people to this who don't know your work, I hope, I hope they go sign up for that. And also, like, you're such a legend. I mean, you've been at, you were at the Forward under Seth Lipsky, and I mean, you were at the Sun. It's like it's great to meet you because you've like, to the extent I have a career in Jewish journalism, it's like the field of Jewish journalism in large part was built by you and a few other people, right? So as it exists now, so it's a huge honor. Um, but um, in the Lieberman piece, you rightly pointed out he died around the time. Did he die right when that book came out, or like a month before, after, or
no, he
something?
died like probably 6 or 8 months before that book came
Before. So
out.
he wasn't around to publicize it. And I have to
Yeah.
admit, I didn't know that book existed. And your piece on it was like so moving. And you talked about the four, how you quoted him talking about the four awakenings in history. And I guess my question for you, as the person who's more like awakening sympathetic or awakening open or positive, is like, I've put down these markers that are, one could say are a little, perhaps too circumscribed or too narrow. And I think that's your critique. Perhaps that's your critique of the way I'm talking about it. What would it look like for you? Like, let's say that this was, because no one is saying like there's an awakening efflorescing now, right? The question is, the argument would be, we're at the beginning of one, or there's one kind of simmering, and here are some data points for it. And you were very shrewd to point out, like, you're right. If Trump is selling Bibles and not other tchotchkes, like that probably does speak to something. So let's say we're in like month one or year one of like what's going to be a 10 or 20-year awakening. Do you, if I'm too narrowly circumscribing what it would look like or what the evidence for it would be, what would you look for? Like what would be the stuff of it, say 3 or 5 years down the road?
Look, I mean, there's these Pew and Gallup uh, polls are pretty robust in terms of like large sample sizes and asking the same question over time. Like there's good longitudinal trends on those polls. And so I think you have to see some of those numbers, like on questions like, do you believe in God? Have you attended religious service in person in the last month yourself. Um, and there's another question that how important is religion in your life, I think.
Okay.
Um, and so those questions, they need to start trending up instead of down. And the church attendance one has started trending up. And it took a huge hit during the pandemic. So
Right.
we're still not like above, I think, 2019 levels. But,
Okay.
I think the having a positive slope instead of a negative slope in those trend lines is one, very clear thing. And then, you could talk about levels, but you also could talk about rates of change. And so that's the
Mm,
sort of social science answer. The anecdotal, kind of cultural answer, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like watch the you watch what's going on in Washington, and you've got a Secretary of Defense with a Crusader cross tattoo. You've got a White House press secretary with a big visible cross around her neck. And you could say, well, what they're doing is not letting in refugees and cutting off money to feed hungry and poor people. But something's going on, something's noticeable
right.
is going on there. I think I look at it partly as a real estate. Another thing you could look at is real estate. Like when the business sections of newspapers are no longer running stories about churches selling off their real estate
Mm,
or being converted to condos,
right.
and instead they're running stories about factories or or like office buildings being converted to religious use. Like it's interesting. The fast growing denomination within Judaism is Chabad, the Lubavitchers.
Yep.
And so here in Boston, in the past week, I got getting emails. I was on one. There's a zoning hearing or a historical commission hearing in Cambridge to knock down one old house to build an expanded Chabad headquarters in Harvard Square, and one in Chestnut Hill to get the town of Brookline to approve, another building project. And so, you know, that is not like what's happening necessarily in conservative or reform
Right.
Judaism, but I think, and it may never happen in sort of mainline Protestantism, like that may be over, but certainly like the real estate piece as well as the public opinion piece are pieces that at least you could measure and track somehow.
So I guess, yeah, and I will, as a sort of parting thought to all of that, I would say I agree with all that. And I would say that what we want to look for is more engagement with religion among what we might call the normies and in the center, right? What people like Peter Thiel or even, Joe Lieberman, who was kind of famous as the Orthodox Jewish senator, right? That what these exceptions are doing, these exceptional people, love them or hate them, might be an interesting bellwether of something. But what'll be really interesting is if there are more mayors and small town vice presidents of banks and dentists and whatever in places where the de-churching has really happened, which is not just blue and purple states but red states as well, who are kind of re-upping in some quiet but observable way. I'll also just make a prediction, which is that that among people like Thiel and Musk, it will be a fad. It will not. Well, Thiel has been saying he's Christian for a long time, so I shouldn't lump them all together. But there will be people for whom this is faddish, as you pointed out, right? This is that the Bay Area is kind of ground zero for so many fads and trends. Um, Whereas you and I are stuck in New England, just like wearing the same sweaters we wore in college. So
Right, although what starts in California often spreads to the rest of the country. So
yeah, no,
um
I'm thinking wildfires, which but
Well, and
but
the wildfires we didn't mention, and obviously they're in the South, but it's not unusual for after one of these terrible events like the
totally,
smallpox plague in New England preceded that first or second Great Awakening. Like,
totally.
people, and so
I have a final question for you. Are you the last Ira? Is there anyone younger than you who's Ira?
uh, uh, so I think I've had been at least two different synagogues where there are three Iras. So I
Wow.
have to there. You don't see very many young Iras. That is the case.
But
But
you know what? You don't see many young Marks. I was
it's
one of them.
like on the other hand, like it's just like the religious trend,
It
or
could tip.
like Worcester. Like, is it
Facts.
is it a forever downward trend, a
Who knew there'd
secular
be
decline, or is it a cyclical? These things come back, just like biblical names or what
Who
have
knew there'd
you.
be kids named Sadie and Edith and
Right,
Esther? And
right.
I think Iras do. Anyway, it's been such an honor. As I said, I've been reading you since I feel like you made it big when I was 23 and you were 25, but I was reading you. And so it's a real honor.
I don't know. Well, I've admired your work too for a long time. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for doing this, and it was fun.
Do it again, I hope.
All right. Yep.
All right.
Bye bye.
Later. Bye.